Based on the Ferrari Enzo, but widened, lengthened, and dressed up with an outrageous wing, the 2004 Maserati MC12 is one of the craziest and most controversial supercars ever built. But that shouldn't be surprising, as unlike the Enzo it was based on, the MC12 was built specifically to race, and in the championships it was allowed to enter, nothing could compare. So why did Maserati build such a mental machine? How successful truly was it? And why was it so controversial? The MC12 wasn't like most other GT racing cars of the early 2000s. The Corvettes, Ferrari 550s and Vipers of the world were road-going sports cars that were heavily reworked to go racing. Maserati, on the other hand, were reviving an old 90s GT tradition known as the homologation special. The MC12 was always going to be a race car, but to compete in GT class racing, a car has to have a street-legal version available to buy, and a minimum number have to be manufactured. The road-going MC12 only existed to tick this box. In this regard, its closest contemporary was probably the Saleen S7/S7R, but that comparison isn't perfect, as despite the S7 always being intended to race, Saleen did also build them for more than just ticking that box. Maserati's approach was much more in line with that of the 90s era Mercedes CLK GTR and Porsche 911 GT1/GT1 Strassenversion. The benefit of going into development with this in mind is that the designers and engineers could build a road car as close to the limit as was allowed by law, and therefore make the most of the limited modifications they were allowed to do to the racing version. But the MC12 wasn't totally new. It shared its chassis with Ferrari's Enzo supercar, a carbon fibre monocoque that would prove excellent for racing. It also shared its engine with the Enzo, a mid-mounted, naturally aspirated 6-litre V12. Though in road-going trim, the MC12's engine was detuned compared to the Enzo to make sure that the Ferrari remained the faster car. Side note, if you're wondering how they were able to do this, Maserati was owned by Ferrari at this point in time, and both existed under the Fiat umbrella. Hence Maserati's ability to build an Enzo-based car. The design and engineering teams for the two marques had very significant overlap. But this was no simple rebadging. While the MC12 and Enzo may have shared their underpinnings, the MC12's new body evolved it into a wholly different beast. Conceived by Giorgetto Giugiaro and designed by Frank Stephenson, the MC12 had a longer, pointier nose than the Enzo, larger, flatter surfaces, and extended rear bodywork, all to help create more downforce while minimising parasitic drag. The result divided opinion then and continues to today. To me, it's one of those cars that looks cool but not pretty, if you know what I mean. Striking, certainly, but crude even next to its Ferrari sibling. I'm sure plenty of you watching disagree with me on that though, so please leave your thoughts in the comments. Opinions aside, it's important to remember that the MC12 was function first. Criticisms of the car's sheer enormity, difficulty to drive on the road, and truly laughable impracticality, it didn't even have a rear window, which back in the early 2000s was considered beyond the pale, all missed the point. The clear goal meant the racing version was being developed parallel to the road car. To keep your projects running as smoothly and effectively as Maserati's MC12 program, you should check out this video's sponsor, Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one management software suite that gives you all the tools you need to keep your business on the right track and moving forward. With Odoo's project application, you can easily create and oversee projects, assign tasks, set priorities and deadlines, and lay out clear descriptions to make sure your team are all on the same page. Beyond just being able to create and manage projects, the project app also allows you to add notes, schedule meetings, and even attach files all from in the app, which makes it so much easier to actually work instead of faffing around trying to find the right files or opening new tabs to send notes. Beyond the mechanics of the app, Odoo also provides a variety of views so you can ensure whatever kind of project you're working on is easy to navigate and understand at a glance. The Kanban view lets you see your project organised by stage and allows you to easily move tasks around to optimise your pipeline. The Gantt view lays out your tasks on a visual timeline, and for those of you who are like me and prefer a classic list, the list view shows you everything you need to know simply and easily. The best part? Your first Odoo app is free for life, including hosting and support, so there's no cost to stress about and no big commitment. So click the link below to take better control of your projects with Odoo. Thanks to Odoo for sponsoring this section of the video, and now back to the story of the Maserati MC12. Thanks to the parallel development, the racing version of the MC12 was quite similar to the road car. Save for the kinds of modifications you'd expect. The interior had a lot less leather, for example. Proper racing aero, about 250 kilos of weight saving, along with a new sequential semi-automatic gearbox and various other tweaks, prepared the behemoth MC12 for the start of its racing career. A quick note here though. The FIA initially refused to homologate the MC12 as a GT1 car. The articles I've read all make some sort of vague statement about debated homologation, but I've had trouble nailing down exactly what the problem was. I assume it's something to do with the low production numbers or the proportions of the car. Only 50 road cars were built and only half of those were 2004 model year cars. But that's just a guess, so if you happen to know more about the situation there, please let me know. The upshot is, however, that the cars would be unable to score points in the FIA GT Championship until the final round of the 2004 season. As mentioned earlier, Maserati was owned by Ferrari at this point in history, and it's worth pointing out the strange timing of the MC12's debut in this context. 2003 had seen Ferrari introduce its own customer GT racing car in the form of the 575 GTC, a car they had built to compete against the independently developed pro-drive Ferrari 550 GTS, which won a number of GT racing titles in the early 2000s. My video about the 550 GTS goes into much more detail about this. The long and the short of it though was that the 575 GTC just wasn't as good as ProDrive's car, and so the MC12's introduction only a year after Ferrari's 575 GTC debut was sort of an admission of defeat by Ferrari, whether they wanted to admit it or not. This dynamic heaped pressure onto the MC12, as if it wasn't able to right the wrongs of the 575 GTC, it would potentially turn an unfortunate stumble into a more major embarrassment. But confidence was high, and despite not being eligible for points, the MC12 made its racing debut at Imola, the 8th round of the 2004 FIA GT Championship. Fiat and Ferrari chairman Luca de Montezemolo was in attendance, along with the automotive press, gathered by Ferrari to witness the MC12's GT racing debut on the Scuderia's home track. Imola's full name is the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Edino Ferrari after all. Being based on the Enzo, everyone knew that this car was as much a reflection of the Ferrari marque as it was of Maserati's. 2 MC12s would contest the event, run by AF Corsa. The opportunity for something to go badly wrong was mitigated by the sheer number of Ferraris on the grid. 3 of the relatively new Ferrari-built 575 GTCs were present, as well as the class-leading ProDrive-built 550 GTS. The worst-case scenario appeared to be that the MC12 loses to another prancing horse in the Ferrari stable. Unfortunate but not disastrous. Fate, however, had other ideas, as Vitaphone Racing's Altson and Bartels took a shock victory driving the aggressively American Saleen S7R. Montezemolo commented on the loss and to his credit was very gracious, stating, quote, "We were no match for the Saleens today." The defeat must have been gut-wrenching for everyone involved, but luckily for them, the MC12 quickly turned things around, with AF Corsa taking victory at Oschersleben and then a 1-2 finish at the season's final round in China, with the winning car in the hands of Mike Salo and Andrea Bertolini. This race also saw the car score its first championship points, and while relatively inconsequential for the 2004 season results, the MC12 was poised for a strong start to 2005. Unlike other GT cars that raced in a handful of high-profile international championships, the MC12's reach was limited. The FIA, after much deliberation, chose to allow the car into its events. The ACO, however, didn't. The ACO is the organising body behind the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and its reach extended to include series associated with Le Mans, including the European Le Mans Series, later the Le Mans Endurance Series, and the American Le Mans Series. The MC12 was too long and too wide, and therefore didn't meet the ACO regulations for GT1 class competition. As such, the car couldn't race in ACO-sanctioned events. To add some much-needed extra complications to this though, IMSA, who were the governing body of the ACO-backed ALMS, did carve out an exception for the MC12 in 2005, provided it ran with a shortened nose, allowing it to race but leaving it ineligible for points. Unfortunately for my sanity while researching this, even this carve-out had its own carve-out. We'll circle back to that later. This trouble with the ACO is why the primary venue of the MC12's racing career remained the FIA GT Championship. For 2005, Maserati MC12s were run by two teams in the FIA GT Championship, Vitaphone Racing and JMB Racing, both fielding 2 cars each. Despite round 1 going the way of the ProDrive built Ferrari 550 GTS, round 2 saw the Maserati runners storm through, sweeping the podium, with JMB's number 15 car winning and the 2 Vitaphone cars on the podium not far behind. This kind of set the tone for the season, as despite interruptions from the new Aston Martin DBR9 and the established Ferraris and Corvettes, Vitaphone's MC12s propelled them to GT1 team's victory in 2005, with drivers Michael Bartels and Timo Schneider ending the season tied for second in the Drivers' Championship, just a single point behind Gabriel Gardel, who won driving a Ferrari for Labre competition. The fact that Vitaphone had shared the MC12 success with JMB, who came second in the team standings, diluted the total points haul for their drivers. Combined with uncharacteristic reliability trouble at Imola and Oschersleben, the final results didn't quite communicate how far ahead the MC12 really was. Despite missing out on the Drivers' Championship, however, the teams and manufacturers' standings were unequivocal. The Maserati MC12 was GT1's new top dog. The success of the MC12 in the 2005 FIA GT Championship prompted Maserati to celebrate, with 12 special edition cars for their most enthusiastic clients. The MC12 Versione Corsa was basically a GT1 spec car available for private use, a bit like the Ferrari FXX. Again, like the FXX, it wasn't road legal in the form it arrived from the factory. It was the most extreme version of one of the most extreme cars money could buy, and at the time, the €1 million price tag attached to it made it one of the most expensive cars in the world too. After a 2005 season so good Maserati made 12 cars to celebrate and painted them all Victory Blue, yes, that's actually what the colour's called, 2006 would need to be something special to avoid being seen as a step backwards. Vitaphone Racing were the only team running MC12s that year, and as reigning champions, they got car number 1, with the second being number 2. Their competition would primarily consist of the ProDrive built Aston Martin DBR9s, Zakspeed Racing run Saleen S7Rs, and occasionally GLPK's Corvette C6R. The season started well, with victory at Silverstone for the number 1 car of Bertolini and Bartels. It would be the first of 5 victories for the team that year, including the 24 hours of Spa, and the rock-solid reliability of the MC12 meant even the bad days were good days for Vitaphone. They won a second team's championship in a row in 2006, with drivers Michael Bartels and Andrea Bertolini taking joint drivers' championship glory too. Maserati lost out on the manufacturer's title though, mostly due to the fact there was only one team running MC12s that scored points, whereas the DBR9 was being run by 4 teams, securing Aston Martin the manufacturer's title. 2007 saw Vitaphone Racing joined by Scuderia Playteam in the FIA GT Championship as a consistent MC12 runner. Playteam had actually run in a single round the previous year but had failed to finish the race. Despite not achieving as many wins as they had done the previous year, with 3 in total, Vitaphone Racing was still able to comfortably take the team's championship in 2007 for the 3rd time in a row, and Maserati driver Thomas Biaggi took drivers' championship victory, with Maserati once again topping the manufacturer's standings. The MC12's FIA GT run was becoming pretty significant, and there was no sign that their momentum was dissipating yet. I must now circle back to something I mentioned earlier though, the situation around the MC12's inclusion in the American Le Mans series. In 2005, the car had been allowed to compete with a shortened front end, but wasn't eligible for points no matter its performance. In the end, it didn't matter all too much, as the Risi competition-run car wasn't really living up to the reputation of its European siblings. Despite not being allowed to score points though, other teams were unhappy that the car had been allowed to compete, worried that a non-championship car could still impact the championship through accidents or the like. But for 2007, this dynamic changed. Didier Taze and Freddie Leinhardt entered an MC12 into the ALMS GT1 class under the banner of Doran Racing. The class wasn't super competitive, having been mostly bulldozed by the dominant Corvettes, and so organisers were keen to introduce competition when they could. The result was that the MC12 was finally eligible to score points. They contested 2 rounds in 2007, Road America and the Petit Le Mans at Road Atlanta. Both saw podium finishes, but as I mentioned earlier, the GT1 grid was sparse in the ALMS. So much so that it was actually impossible for them not to finish on the podium in both those races. However you cut it, the MC12 in its ALMS trim was no match for the Corvette C6R, which was its only competition. Back in Europe, and the MC12's run in the FIA GT Championship continued. Vitaphone Racing won the championship again in 2008, with Bartels and Bertolini taking joint first in the Drivers' Championship. This was followed by yet another championship victory for both team and drivers in 2009, marking Vitaphone Racing's 5th consecutive FIA GT Championship victory with the Maserati MC12. In fact, the only reason their FIA GT Championship run ended is because the championship ended, becoming the new FIA GT1 World Championship instead in 2010. They won this too, taking yet another win in the championship's inaugural season, with Bartels and Bertolini once again leading the drivers' field. That, however, after 7 years of competition and 6 victories, would be the MC12's last hurrah in the international GT racing scene. No long drawn-out decline in form, just one last win, as strong as any other, and then nothing. The MC12 disappeared from the grid. They could have contested 2011, but new rules introduced in 2010 put a hard limit on how long the MC12 could keep competing, as an overhaul of the regulations meant the cars would no longer meet the rules of the class. They had only actually been able to contest 2010 thanks to a 2-year grace period offered to existing competitors. With the end in sight, Vitaphone Racing's generational Maserati-powered run came to an end. It's safe to say then that the original goal for the car, to be a purposeful and successful GT racing machine, was quite suitably achieved. Despite carrying weight penalties for much of its racing life in an attempt to peg it back, the pace and unshakable reliability of the MC12 GT1 placed it firmly at the front of European GT racing for the better part of a decade. Beyond FIA GT, the MC12 became a mainstay in Italian national GT events, where I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear it did very well indeed. Had the car been eligible to compete in other international GT racing series, who knows how impactful it could have been. Maybe it would have even been able to give the Corvette a proper run for its money, or win its class at Le Mans. Alas, the car's sheer size, crucial for its aerodynamic concept, meant we never really got to find out. What ifs aside though, the Maserati MC12 is a car that deserves to be remembered for the incredible success it did achieve, and the absolute engineering determination it took to make it happen. It remains one of Europe's most successful GT racing cars ever. The MC12 battled with many cars through its career, but one of the best was undoubtedly the pro-drive Ferrari 550 GTS, which you can watch my video about here. We're getting really close to 100,000 subscribers, so if you enjoyed this video, subscribe below. It's totally free and it means the world. Thank you to our channel members for supporting Automobilistic. If you want to help us keep making videos like this, then support us directly by clicking the join button below. Thanks for watching, and until next time, goodbye.